The average person is said to spend 15 minutes in the bathroom. Why not take advantage of that time and learn something new? Presenting the 15-minute podcast on weird facts, crazy details, and funny particulars that you'll be able to enjoy while you're taking a on your free time. Welcome to This Shit with Sam Butler. Welcome to another episode of The Shit Podcast. I'm very happy to be here with you guys. Thank you for joining me. We're going to talk about something that just happened last week, St. Paddy's Day. That's right. I have some friends in Ireland. Shout out to my friends in Belfast, John, Tom. Shout out to you guys. I learned from you guys, it's not St. Patrick's Day. It's either St. Patrick's Day or St. Paddy's Day, but you don't say St. Patty's Day because that's wrong. But we're going to talk about St. Paddy's Day a little bit, being that it was last week. And I want to thank you guys for joining me on this episode. There's a lot of interesting facts about St. Paddy's Day that I didn't know. And I thought it would be interesting to share with you guys on this episode of The Shit Podcast. With that being said, I don't know if you know this or not, but St. Paddy's Day, obviously, by being called St. Paddy's Day, is a religious celebration. Now, when you think of St. Paddy's Day, what is it that you think about? You think about beer, celebration, party, craziness, corned beef, and cabbage. You think about green beer, everything green, leprechauns. All of this comes to mind when you think about St. Paddy's Day. What's ironic, though, is that St. Paddy's Day had no alcohol before 1970. That's right. You would think alcohol was part of the celebration from day one, but it was a religious celebration, and alcohol really had no place in the celebration till 1970, which is mind-blowing because usually priests and especially the friars love beer. So it's a little weird to me that this was one of the first weird facts that I found was that it wasn't until 1970 that you actually had alcohol related. And some people drink green beer. Other people like whiskey, Irish whiskey. I'm an Irish whiskey fan. So I'm more of a Bushmills fan. I'm not so much, what's the other, slipped my mind. You're going to get mad at me because you guys know what I'm talking about. Dang, slipped my mind. Anyway, alcohol was not part of the celebration. So how did it come about? What's going on? How did St. Paddy's Day come to be? Well, it's interesting that the St. Patrick that is responsible for St. Paddy's Day wasn't even Irish. He was born in Scotland, and he was kidnapped at about the age of 13. Some articles that I read said that he was kidnapped at 16, and he was in captivity, and he was being made to work as a slave. And a few years later, he grows up, becomes a teenager, 19, 20 years old, escapes, makes his way down to France, and starts his path on becoming a priest. Once he becomes a priest, he comes back to Ireland, and now he's in Ireland trying to Jameson. That's what I was thinking about. Sorry, but Jameson was another whiskey. I don't know why it slipped my mind. It's like the most popular one. But anyway, St. Patrick, his name was Maewyn Succat, and he was became St. Patrick, right? And he comes to Ireland, and he's trying to convert everyone into Catholicism, because we know that there's two main factions. There's Protestants and Catholics. This is the year 400. So we know that Protestantism is still not a big thing at that time. So it's my opinion that he was converting people from their Celtic and pagan different religions, trying to get them to become Christian, not necessarily Catholic, right? So he's there. Why do we celebrate St. Paddy's Day? Well, the folkloric explanation to this is that he actually stood on a hill and he chased all the snakes out of Ireland. Now, there was some scientific research done, and one, there's no snakes in Ireland, so that's like kind of an easy feat to chase them out if they're not there. And two, it is suspected that prior to the year 400, Ireland was part of the ice caps, therefore too cold for reptiles. So the theory is that he never really chased snakes out of Ireland. But I'm thinking maybe he did. And that's why there's no snakes in Ireland. I don't know. But did he or didn't he? I don't know. But there's no snakes in Ireland. So that's a pretty good reason to get drunk and have a good celebration. You know. Why the shamrock though? You know, because when you think of Irish, you think of the shamrock. When you think of St. Patrick's Day, you think of the shamrock. And so why the shamrock? Well, it was a very interesting fact to learn that in the St. Patrick's Day celebration, the shamrock is prevalent, but it wasn't always so. What happens is the shamrock was considered a sacred plant. And St. Patrick, when he was evangelizing, realized that he could use the shamrock to teach the Trinity. So he would use the leaves on the shamrock to teach the Trinity. And we know that Celtically, this was a revered plant. And it also symbolized the changing of winter into spring and spring into summer. So this was a big deal for Ireland. And it was incorporated into the celebration more around the year around the 19th century, the 1800s. And this was because nationalistic pride started to develop in Ireland, a separation from the English crown and wanting their independence. And so this became a symbol of that, and it became a symbol of the struggle, and therefore the color scheme even changed, because the color scheme in Ireland was like baby blue. And as soon as the shamrock starts to take off, this nationalistic pride, everything starts to be green. And that's why we associate green with Ireland. I mean, and this happens like 1800s. So now it's part of the celebration. Green beer, green hats, green everything. And it's even interesting that although Ireland has major celebrations of St. Patty's Day, they're not the biggest. It's interesting to me. I found another detail that said that most of the celebrations, the biggest celebration, is actually held in New York City. And, of course, Boston and Chicago are some of the places that it's the most prevalent. And New York having the biggest parade, I think they have something like 200,000 people come through on the parade and go down like Fifth Avenue. And so it's a big deal in New York. It's a big deal in Chicago. They paint the Chicago River green during St. Patrick's Day, which is pretty cool. And it was a very interesting fact when I found out that the reason that came about was that the mayor of Chicago in 1962, Mayor Daley, was actually looking into some dyes that would help determine pollution levels in the water coming off of factories. So there's some dye testing that's out there, and it still exists today. They dye water to see how it flows, where it flows, so on and so forth. And so in 1962, they figure out that they're dyeing water green to detect pollution. I don't know how exactly, but he says, hey, I have an idea. We should dye the river green during St. Patty's Day. And this became a tradition in Chicago. So every year they dye the river green. Now, how do they celebrate St. Patty's Day on the space station? They actually celebrate it on the space station. I don't know exactly how they celebrate it, but I'm assuming it involves beer and whiskey. But every March 17th, the International Space Station will actually shine green beams of light into outer space. in commemoration of St. Patty's Day. And I don't know that it's so much a religious celebration anymore as much as there's a little bit of nationalistic pride, but a lot of us have ancestry that comes from Ireland. Me personally, I thought my family was from Ireland, and because the family crest is in Kilkenny Castle, and they've got the Butler crest there over the door, and I thought, oh, for sure, we're Irish. And then I did some research, and I realized that my particular side of the family wasn't from Ireland. They're from England. They came over with the Methodist immigration in 1765, and they were abolitionists. And my oldest immigrated relative is buried at the Methodist Church in Esmond, Virginia, David T. Butler, which was a shock. But I was able to trace my family line back to that. And so we thought we were Irish forever. And that's part of the fun of this celebration, is celebrating our heritage. And so it's not my heritage particularly, but hey, just like you guys celebrate Cinco de Mayo, we'll celebrate St. Patty's Day. Now, I am Mexican, but you know what's ironic is Mexicans do not celebrate Cinco de Mayo. That's strictly a white guy's way of celebrating a Mexican St. Patty's Day. One of the things that I want to talk about a little bit is the leprechaun. Where'd the leprechaun come from? What does that have to do with St. Patty? Was that his little assistant? No, it wasn't. Actually, the leprechaun is a Celtic mythical creature, and of course, it's a troll. It's a type of troll. It's a type of dwarf. And it's supposed to have mystical and magical powers. We've all heard the stories of finding a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow, and I think that's pretty cool, because you can never see the end of a rainbow because it's an optical illusion, but that's where the folklore comes from. Well, the leprechaun is generally a grumpy guy, and he can be good or evil, either one. Now, the ones we think about are wearing green with a little green hat and buckles on their shoes, but there's also instances of leprechauns wearing red outfits with buckles on their shoes, and it's said that the leprechaun is actually the caretaker to the fairies, and it's actually the cobbler. He's actually the guy that makes their shoes, which I thought was a pretty interesting thing. Now, I was looking at the first parades. I mean, the first parade was same. Let me see. In the United States, people in Ireland had been celebrating St. Patrick since the 1600s, and St. Patrick's Day parade began in America. It actually predates the founding of America. The very first St. Patrick's Day parade was March 17, 1601, in a Spanish colony of what is now St. Augustine, Florida. Shout out to Les. My buddy Les is out in St. Augustine. But the parade and St. Patrick's Day celebration were recognized by the Spanish colony's Irish speaker, Ricardo Artur. More than a century later, homesick Irish soldiers serving in the English military marched in Boston in 1737 and in New York in March 17th. And so that's when the official parades began. An interesting fact, 2020 and 2021 was the first time in, I think, 100 years that there was no St. Patty's Day parade due to the COVID virus. Now, how did the Irish, what was the big deal about the Irish in the United States? Well, the first Irish immigrants that came to the United States were actually Protestant, middle-class Irish. So they started arriving in the United States, and they were treated okay because most of them were educated, most of them had money, most of them were middle-class or upper-middle-class, even high-class Irish. They came over and immigrated. Well, the potato famine hit Ireland, and I'm thinking this is like 1830s, 1823, I believe. Not sure on the date. Actually, it says it hit in 1845. I did write it down. Potato famine hits in 1845. 1 million poor and uneducated Catholic Irish immigrate to the United States. And in addition to all of the racism and classism that they have to face by English and other people that are already here, they also have to face that from their brethren. that are Protestant. So we see that that's how things started happening here in the United States with the Irish, and why there was Irish slaves, and why there was a lot of poverty in the Irish community, and how that community had to come up. And now it's actually a sense of pride to see how it's come along in the United States. And with that, I'd like to say happy St. Patrick's Day. I hope you guys had a good time. Thank you for watching the podcast. That's this episode of the Shit Podcast, talking about St. Patty's Day and the different customs. There's a lot of more stuff to talk about, but I'm out of time. And I want to thank you guys for joining me. If you'd like to follow me on my social media, you can find me as Tu Amigo Sam. That's TU Amigo Sam. I'm on all social media that way. That's also my YouTube channel. And if you'd like to subscribe, and hit the notifications button, I would really appreciate it. And that wraps us up for this episode of the Shit Podcast. Thank you guys. We'll catch you on the next one.